Hi there, my name is Leigh Berrier and I have a few thoughts I want to share with you. So, I have been a reader for many years and I enjoy reading a variety of books. Being read to, reading on my own, listening to audiobooks. I simply appreciate the written word. Yeah, I was a kid who always had a book in hand as we ran errands or went on trips. In fact, I still keep that habit up now as an adult. I really appreciate it when an author can describe his or her ideas in such a way to paint a word picture in the reader's mind. Sometimes I will read or hear something an author says and I am struck by how profound or even how simple it might be, and sometimes I simply want to marinate in it for a while to fully grasp its meaning. When authors can pen concepts so that their readers can identify with the idea the reader's working to communicate, or can understand how the idea can relate to something in the reader's own life, I feel a real connection to that author. Perhaps that's why I appreciate that Jesus shares parables in the Bible. The fact that he would choose to illustrate ideas by using everyday events to better help his listeners understand the vast and sometimes complex issues he shares, well, it gives me an even greater thankfulness for his creativity. To me, it's a sign of a good teacher to be able to relate the ideas taught to what the audience can relate to in everyday life. It was eye-opening to me to be able to learn that Jesus purposefully chose the type of illustrations he used. He often used in his parables to involve agrarian life, since so many of his followers had experienced living on farms or working with food crops or with livestock. His audience would have included shepherds, grape growers, or individuals who worked in fruit orchards or with wheat or raised livestock. His use of concrete examples from everyday life and the lives of those around him as he shared his teaching parables reminds me that sometimes it can be easier to remember a story than to remember straight facts. I imagine this is true because we can see ourselves in these stories, which allows us to better relate to and remember the concepts he illustrated in the stories. Last year, a friend shared a new book with me, one that was called Chasing Vines by Beth Moore. I first listened to it as an audiobook on my daily walks. I liked it so much I bought a physical copy of it so that I could read and reread and then highlight parts that really stood out to me. It seems the author of the book had a real aha moment when she visited Italy and saw grapes growing in the fields. She originally thought the grape was a very uneventful fruit, certainly not her favorite. Yet upon visiting in a country that grows so many different types of varieties and having the opportunity to see them up close and personal and actually growing in the fields, in the vineyards, when she arrived back home, she began to research more about them and the growing process of plants, which can transfer over to our spiritual growth and how God can be such an integral part of the process. As I read this book, Chasing Vines, I began to see how many of the concepts she addressed fit into my own life, and even saw examples of how plants in our own garden illustrated some of the concepts. We have an area in our yard that we decided to convert to more of a natural area. So spring of 2020, we visited a variety of plant nurseries to find which plants we wanted to try to plant, settling on a number of perennials which could come back year after year, in addition to a few pots of annuals to change up with the seasons. One perennial we selected is called Purple Heart, a hardy plant with deep purple leaves and tiny little lavender leaves and flowers. Wow, what an impact of color and texture we enjoyed last spring and summer and fall into our garden as the plant flourished and almost tripled in size. Then came the cold weather, and all that was left was small brown twigs. Definitely not lush or pretty. It looked like, well, dead, dried up sticks. Take a look at this picture I took in March of this year after winter. Huh. Now, since I had never paid attention to other landscaping which featured Purple Heart plants during the cold weather, I was not expecting how the plants would die back. And then it hit me. The plant was only dormant. Upon researching the concept further, I discovered that dormancy occurs in the winter. Plants may look dead on the outside, but there's still much more growing and going on inside the plant. Winter, or dormancy, is a time of preparation, as roots and tree saps respond to the soil and temperature changes to prepare for growth come spring. And at just the right time, there will be an explosion of greens and buds and blooms and colors. As I observed this vision of dormancy within the plant, it occurred to me that we too can go through periods of spiritual dormancy, times in which God may seem silent, like there's no progress in whatever we may have taken to God in prayer. But even though we may not see or feel anything changing, does not mean nothing is happening. Just as with the plant dormancy, in order for plants to bloom the next season, a great deal has to occur inside us before we're ready for the future God has planned for us. If we look back over periods of what may appear to be silence in our lives, we can see that those are precisely the times God was working in us. He always is working to uphold and transform us. Consider this verse from Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Do not be transformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. In my searching to find out more information about how dormancy in plants can relate to spiritual dormancy in us, I stumbled upon a blog written by a veteran homeschool mom named Rachel Carmen. She made a comment that really stood out to me. She said, God works in ways we don't expect, but when we look at his creation and how it works, it often gives us clues to his character. Just like with dormant trees, we need lots of internal and spiritual changes to be prepared for what he has for us in the future. That's because he has a plan for us, both in the immediate and even in the eternal. God focuses on building our character. Sometimes during these dormant times we can feel empty, but it's important to continue doing what we know to be good habits. Habits like reading our Bible, praying, serving others. We may not sense progress, but doing the next right thing can help us to move forward on the inside, fill our hearts and minds up with his word. Build ourselves up during these dormant times in preparation for the spring, the blooming season. This process involves being consistent. When we are in those silent, quiet times, we can remember that God is building us up, just like the plants that appear to be dead on the outside, but are building up proteins and holding up nutrients so they are ready to blossom at just the right time. Just as God works in the world, he's working in us so that we can blossom with joy. Listen to what Paul tells us in Philippians chapter 1, verse 6. And I am sure of this, that he who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ. Now, the first photo I showed you of the purple heart plant was taken in March of this year, coming right out of the winter season. There were just a few dead-looking sticks. But look at this next photo taken in April of this year, just 1 month later. So you can see the difference there in just 1 month. Now take a look at the one I took just this week. The transformation is pretty spectacular. Now hopefully we can remember dormancy occurs in plant life, and it can also occur in our lives as well. And you know what? In the in-between times, we can choose how we deal with the quiet. Perhaps we can reflect on our own past experiences, ones from family, friends, or testimony from others. Sharing our experiences can also help inspire others to keep doing the next right thing, and then others can inspire us when we are struggling with the quiet, the dormancy of life. With so many individuals enjoying being outside, we can also learn from nature and let God's creation be a visual parable for the life lesson of finding joy in dormancy. Remembering what is coming, the potential explosion of greens, buds, blooms, and colors.